What if you lived on purpose? As a woman in this world, what if you lived on purpose deliberately of who you were created to be? I want you to remember two words for this series. We're going to do 3 videos, and today is one of 3. I want you to remember the words deliberate and vulnerable because they are going to go hand in hand. If you think about living in a world where we are told what to do, what not to do, what to look like, how to act, what our feelings mean, basically we are kind of told what good is, but that has gotten so muddled up over the years, and the women that God created us to be have become lost. Do you feel lost? Do you feel like you thought you knew who you were, but you don't really know who you are, and you might know who parts of you are, but it feels a little bit scary to even be those parts? This is the place to be where we are going to talk about coming out of that place of confusion, getting some clarity, and living within the woman God created you to be unapologetically. So, how do we live deliberate? How do we live deliberately? How do we do this? How do we live on purpose? It feels a lot easier than said, right? Like it feels it's not easy to do. So, living in deliberateness, this is where the other word I want you to remember comes in: vulnerability. Vulnerability is nearly lost in our society today. Unapologetically being who you are. Vulnerability now has tags of fear, weakness, it's too scary, comparison, it makes us cower. Vulnerability has become lost. Did you know that we were actually created to be vulnerable? And this world has told us the complete opposite. And so it's no wonder that all of us are living in hiding. And it is time to come out of that hiding. And so let's look at Genesis 2:25, because this is where it all began. Genesis 2:25. God created man and woman. And in verse 25, it's beautiful. Now the man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. When is the last time that you were you or tried to be you and felt no shame? I would gather to bet that it's not been very often. Our world is full of these traps of comparison and judgment. And before we know it, we are apologizing for who we are 25 times a day. And if we don't stop to think about what we're thinking, I talk a lot about this in the office. If we don't stop to think about what we're thinking, then we will live accidentally in a place of shame all day long. We will be apologizing for who we are all day long and not even realize it. But the thing is, our thoughts dictate our feelings. Our feelings dictate our actions, and our actions dictate our life. So, what are your thoughts saying? Think about how you operate on the daily. Is there vulnerability in your life? Is there shame in your life? This is where we need to begin. thinking about our thoughts, thinking about our days, thinking about our actions, how we feel about ourselves, and then move forward into something different. The story of Joseph in chapters 37 through 50 is incredible. Joseph endured so much pain and suffering. He endured betrayal by his dear brothers in his family. He endured being raised up and then being shot down, and then being raised up and then being shot down. Joy and then disappointment. Being elated and then just completely deflated. Does that sound familiar to you? Because these are the things that happen in the world. And if we are not equipped and ready to operate in the identity of who we are going to allow these things of this world to begin to dictate our lives. And before we know it, we're operating in shame and we're hiding. And so Joseph went through so much. He was betrayed by his family. He was almost killed. He was sold. He was raised up. He was thrown into prison. And then he had fresh hope. And that hope was then dashed and delayed, it was dashed and deflated, and he continued to live in this place of why and when and suffering. And then suddenly he was lifted up again, and he was saved, and he was raised up, and he became a man that was over the kingdom at that time. And then a famine came. And his family, who thought he was dead, his family came. And they came for help. And Joseph had two options. He was in power now, and he could have chosen to be angry and put up that wall. Can anybody here relate to me with having a wall? Like, I'm not talking about bricks, but I'm talking about brick walls and walls. Joseph could have put up a wall of fear, of hurt, of anger, or he could have helped them. And what did Joseph choose? He chose vulnerability. In front of his brothers, he eventually, you'll have to read the story, he eventually let them know that he was alive and who he was. And in front of the people who hurt him the most, he wept. He was vulnerable, unapologetic in his feelings, and he forgave, and he found relief. Great relief. If we think about David, David was so full of joy at one point in his life, and he was worshiping with what the word says, all his might. When is the last time you danced like no one was looking? This is an area I am still growing in, and I think so many women are still growing in, is unapologetically being you. And David shows us this beautiful example where he just stripped down his garments because he was just worshiping with all of his might. And he had on just a very small priestly garment. It was sleeveless, and it came down to about the top of his hips. And that is what he wore. And it was accepted, but it wasn't the norm. And he just praised and worshiped God like nobody was looking, undignified, just worshiping the Lord. He was vulnerable. And then we think about Jesus. If we go to Luke 23:34, this is when Jesus had endured such betrayal and hurt. He went through so much suffering and beating and slicing and mocking and sweating, and he stayed. And he walked and walked and walked, and he made his way to the cross, where he hung on the cross, full of blood, sweat, and tears, in front of anyone who wanted to see him. And he could have done one of two things. He could have put up walls and said, "Forget this," and left. And that would have been the end of the world. Or he could have unapologetically been who he was and who he was created to be. And that is what he did. And he looked down, as vulnerable as can be, barely wearing any clothes, nearly naked, in front of everybody, suffering. And in Luke 23:34, he said, "Father, forgive them," in love. And he experienced the greatest peace that anyone will ever experience. And so we see this vulnerability all through the word. In Genesis, when Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed, as you and I were created to be, they lived in abandon. When is the last time you lived in abandon and freedom? And with Joseph, when he chose to just be who he was and wept and felt and forgave, he lived in a place of relief. When is the last time you lived in relief instead of feeling it every other day for a minute? And David, when he was worshiping God and didn't care who was watching, he lived in a place of joy. Have you lost your joy? Are you living in joy? And Jesus on the cross, when he didn't let those walls go up and he was who he was created to be, and he said, "Father, forgive them," and he was vulnerable, he had peace. And so I want to ask you today, when God created Adam and Eve, he said it was very good. And that is you too. When he created humans, he said, God himself said, it was very good. In Psalms, it is said that God created you in your mother's womb intimately, on purpose, in secret. I imagine God's joy as he was just weaving you together and preparing your life. If you were made actually on purpose, are you ready now to forget what people say and live in who you were created to be? Are you ready to really live? If you lived in the intentional design of who you are, if you volunteered to live on purpose in who you were created to be, how much more peace would enter into your life? Now is the time to let other people's opinions go unnoticed and focus only on who you are and who created you to be in this world. In our next video, we are going to talk about vulnerability. So stay connected and watch for that one to come out. We're going to break down vulnerability and really talk about it, the lies of vulnerability and our true identity that will quickly squash those lies and help us to actually move in to this place of freedom. And then in our third video, we are going to talk about how to be the real person that we were created to be. We're going to talk about, now that we've learned about this vulnerability, we're going to talk about how to actually walk it out. So stay with me and look for our next two videos. I love you. I am praying for you. God bless you.